particularly given what we have been through as a community in the last 4 years, immigrant families, immigrant communities, and frankly, as a country, the last 4 years have felt like nothing less than a war on immigrant families and on our country and our democracy. And today, we are so hopeful, right? We really do believe that this is the beginning of a new era in our country. And it gives us great hope that the Biden-Harris administration has begun their administration from day one so strongly and unequivocally centering immigrants and seeing immigrants as a strength to our nation, and with a commitment to undoing the harm of the last 4 years and even before, as they also start and collectively together we build a 21st century immigration system that is truly grounded in racial, economic, and gender justice. As you've already heard from a number of speakers today, and so I think
Elena, I'm so sorry, a little bit slower, please. The interpreters, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Forgot that you guys had translation, and I tend to speak fast, so thank you for that, Sunita. Since you've already heard from a number of speakers, today what I will be focusing on is the public charge rule. At the National Immigration Law Center, the last 4 years, we focused on three major priorities. One was the Muslim and African bans, which Patrice has already spoken to. I'll just say briefly that with the Muslim and African bans, today marks exactly 4 years ago, where we filed the first lawsuit on behalf of Mr. Darwish, who was an Iraqi refugee who filed the first lawsuit against the Trump administration. And that then began the process of the lawsuit that we filed along with other civil rights organizations like the ACLU and others, and successfully, up until a certain point, were able to block the Muslim ban. But the Supreme Court ultimately allowed that to stay on the books. On day one, as Patrice already has mentioned, the Biden administration did rescind the executive orders with respect to the Muslim and refugee and African bans, but we believe that we need to go further than that, and that the Biden administration will need to put in place the processes for families to be reunited. That was actually the first instance of family separation under the Trump years, was when families were blocked from being able to come together. Mr. Darwish, for example, who was that first courageous plaintiff that we represented on January 27th of 2017, came to the United States after having served as an interpreter in Iraq with the US military. And he arrived in the US after having gone through national security vetting. He arrived with his wife and his children, and they were separated at JFK Airport. Some of you will remember that because that was all over the news, and that is what prompted hundreds of thousands of people to go to the airport all over the country and all over the world, frankly, to stop the Muslim ban from going into effect. And so that reunification of families is central to our agenda at the National Immigration Law Center, along with our partners from the Muslim and Arab and South Asian communities. Second, with respect to DACA, which may or may have mentioned before, similar to the Muslim ban, we were ready for DACA. We knew from the Trump administration, actually from even before Trump ran for president, that he was planning to terminate and attack both the DACA program for immigrant youth, as well as the DAPA program for parents of U.S. citizen children that had an initial an announcement from the Obama administration. And so when Trump announced the termination of DACA, we had courageous DACA recipients ready to sue, and we were able to sue within 3 hours. Fast forward until today, we've been able to safeguard the DACA program because the courts have blocked Trump all the way up to the Supreme Court and back. But yet we know that that is temporary, right? That legal limbo, that anxiety, the emotional and economic uncertainty that so many young immigrants have been living with, and their families, as well as their employers and their classmates, all of that needs to come to an end. Really, the Biden administration has already announced that they are planning to preserve and restore DACA, but we need permanent solution, right? That has to be done through Congress, and by working with Congress to make sure that we can provide a path to citizenship and a fast track, right? A fast path to citizenship for not just immigrant youth and dreamers, but the temporary protected status communities that Patrice just spoke to. And then lastly, public charge. So public charge is the other third, is a third major category for us at the National Immigration Law Center that we have focused on the last 4 years. And the reason for that is, as you may recall, this was actually Stephen Miller's #1 priority. It took him almost 4 years to actually put that in place. But public charge had a devastating impact from day one when it was first leaked, which I believe it was leaked intentionally back in 2017. That prompted us at the National Immigration Law Center to co-found the Protecting Immigrant Families campaign, which UndocuBlack is a part of. Patrice sits on the steering committee. And the Protecting Immigrant Families campaign is very excited that through our partnership with the Biden, both the Biden campaign and now the Biden administration, we have a commitment that next week the Biden administration will be announcing the beginning of the process of undoing the public charge rule. And I say the beginning of the process because the Trump administration was very smart in the way that they went about changing this particular rule that actually has its roots in the Chinese Exclusion Act. It has been on the books since the 1880s, and yet it is the Trump administration that implemented it in a way meant very deliberately to slow down the demographic shift in our country, basically creating an immigrant wealth test that would deny people the ability to remain with their families. So again, family separation is a theme. And second, that it would, that if people received healthcare, nutrition, or housing assistance, among other programs, they could be denied a green card. And that fear, that confusion that immigrants have experienced over the last 4 years because of the public charge rule and the broader anti-immigrant agenda has meant that today, in the middle of a pandemic, people are afraid to seek COVID testing, COVID care, and the vaccine when that's available. And so the critical importance for the Biden administration to not only announce next week that they will be undoing the public charge rule, but to then launch a robust outreach and education campaign in partnership with community-based organizations, community health workers, and others who are trusted members.
The fact that they have immediately put into place all of these policies through executive order is a good sign that Pilar actually pointed to, that you'll always hear before in the past that the Democrats would hem and haw and hedge about what needs to happen. This is happening. So we are on a good footing. The proposed immigration bill is a good sign. Immediately, Obama took a year and more to submit something. So I am optimistic. Again, although I believe immigration itself is racist, I compare it to the Fugitive Slave Act. I am extremely optimistic that we will have millions of people and millions of families. So I want to also talk about what Frank said, Frank Sharry, right? Where he talked about 3 planes leaving Louisiana, 3 planes leaving to deport people yesterday or today. I'm not sure. The information is so sparse, which even with an administration that says that we should stop deportation until we review what is happening, you have an agency that has unchecked powers, unchecked authority. They are called a plenary agency. A plenary agency basically means Congress has no authority over them, and you've heard them challenge any deportation in court because the court themselves says that they don't have authority over them. So they can do whatever they want to, and you're seeing that even today. In the past, as soon as the former president took power, immediately what they did is they ran a campaign of terror. To terrorize people, to terrorize our immigrant communities, to terrorize family. The goal was that people will be so afraid that they will leave. So in the last 4 years, they would ask people to bring their passports and their tickets to be deported. You had to self-deport because this administration was terrorizing you. And you saw the impact of that because when they took away TPS, before it was even challenged in the courts, because it was even challenged on the ground, the immigrant community was fleeing to go to Canada, especially the Haitians and the Africans, because they knew, as Patrice said, that they are normally the target of any terror campaign from any administration. They knew they were going to be the low-hanging fruit, and they were immediately going to be picked up and be deported. So they were fleeing under some extreme conditions, but people lost fingers because they were in the snowstorms, etc. So they ran this terror, a campaign of terror, but they also, even though they're a plenary agency, they don't like to be criticized. They don't like to be talked about. They don't like people talking about it. So there's another campaign to target immigrant leaders, advocates like myself. And in 2008, they shackled me and took me away. Took me away, and they wanted to be very public. They wanted it to be public, and they knew it was going to be public because in line with their psychological warfare and the act of terror, if Ravi, who had so many people who support him, could be deported, the person who the delivery worker who was picked up, what chance does he have, right? So it's a terror, and they were happy to do that. Fortunately, we won. I mean, I didn't win my case. I'm still fighting my deportation, but we show people that they can fight and it could be stopped. But I don't only want to talk about me as being an immigrant leader. I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to share my screen because right after we started to look into all the other leader activists, all the organizers, all the people who were going to be targeted by immigration and custom enforcement. You know, they surveilled me, right? They followed me. The immigration director, ICE director, said he knows I bebopped, how I walk, the hat on my head. He knows where I live. I mean, this guy seriously followed me everywhere, surrounded my home and my job, because that's how intent they were on getting rid of leaders. So let me just share the screen here, and I'll put the link on the chat so you all can look at it. What you are seeing here is a map of all immigrant activist leaders who were targeted by immigration. We have over 1,000 people who we have identified who has faced this. If you click on the buttons, you will see that there's a lot more information that comes up that highlights people's stories. Those who want to be public you will get their information here. You will see the different categories of people who, or based upon what they were targeted, and the different agencies that are doing that. Let me just stop the share. I'm going to be putting it on the chat right now for everyone to have the link for that. So what we have seen is that this agency is